A report that has recommended that numerous former senior SA officials, including its ex-chairperson Dudu Myeni, be investigated by law enforcement agencies and the National Prosecuting Authority for corruption and fraud. The report found that SAA was wrecked by corruption and fraud during the tenure of Myeni, who is close to former President Jacob Zuma. Now we joined by SABC economics editor Tshepo Mongoayi. Very good morning to you, Tshepo. A lot of emphasis on governance and improper deals that were conducted, whether it's SAA or SARS. Talk to us about what the report says with regards to the findings and recommendations, particularly in this case for South African Airways.
Good morning, Desiree, and to the viewers. Indeed, there were some serious findings that were made in the report, where we all know about the state of many of our state-owned enterprises. The Auditor General every year highlights the gaps in terms of how these institutions conduct their affairs. So, but that also manifests itself in serious corruption that resulted in state capture. But I think what is very interesting is that as we enter this new phase in terms of the period of state capture, the focus now would move to a prosecution and remedial actions that needs to be taken. I think of interest to all South Africans would be, what is it that government is going to do? In the report, you could there was a line where the Deputy Chief Justice indicated that there hasn't been much action referring to the case against former SAA Dudu Myeni in terms of the criminal charges, that he hasn't had anything around that. So it's going to be slow, and it's going to be very interesting to see what is it that is going to be done. Because if you look at the amount of money that was spent on this commission, it cannot be just about the time frames that the commission had to look at. It has to look beyond that. It has to be to result in institutions or rules and regulations that will be with us for the longest time, to ensure that similar incidents of state capture, if they do happen, we do know exactly how to deal with them. It has to leave a legacy to address similar issues, because if you look at it, Desiree, as the work of the commission was ongoing, we heard of new type of state capture that was happening outside the terms of reference. You can talk about the PPE saga, where almost similar incidents that happened during the period of state capture, where the reference looked at was actually taking place. So it's going to be very interesting. It talks about the creation of an anti-corruption body. I think it has to be something that we can see, something that we can relate to say, this happened because of state capture. This helped us. This institution was created because of the Commission of State Capture. It has to be a new way of doing things that must actually come out as a result of the work of the state capture.
Tshepo, never mind new ways, but just how does this encourage SOEs and corporates to go back to their SOEs and policies and on governance going forward?
You see, I think the only way is if people know that when they don't do the right thing, they will be caught, and there are rules, and the rules are very, very clear in terms of what would happen if you don't follow those rules. I think that will help. The issue of dealing with people who are operating in government or in state-owned enterprises who are who are criminals, it needs to be addressed as well. So because what we are seeing is that there seems to be accountability. There's no accountability as such. So you do find that people can easily pass the buck on various serious allegations from the top bottom, where everyone would say, well, no, it wasn't me, it was because of circumstances, or it's because of the previous people who were in here that resulted in certain actions. So I think if out of this report we can be able to see that indeed, people, if they break the law, people who are entrusted with a lot of responsibilities, if they are found on the wrong side of the law, they'll be dealt with. I think this would go a long way in addressing some of these issues. I know the Auditor General has been given extra powers in dealing with people, officials who are failing to follow some of the recommendations that are made. So I think that too would also help. But what is interesting, as I indicated, the establishment of the anti-corruption body, if that can also assist in discouraging such actions, because as we know, as we speak, similar incidents are actually happening somewhere, and we would know and would find out about them in the next month or year or so.
So the report also recommends that former SARS head Tom Moyane be charged with perjury in relation to his evidence in Parliament. Take us back to what happened, what was said during his evidence that led to this particular recommendation.
If you look at the report, the current one, you can tell there are actually three figures that dominate this report. On SARS, you have Tom Moyane, and then on SAA's, Dudumieni, and of course, Transnet is Popo Molefe. So the whole report was built around those particular individuals and what they did with various companies and how they deal with certain individuals who perhaps were not in agreement with what they were trying to do in those institutions. So in the case of SAA, there were, incidents where the former SAA chairperson was actually dealing with people who are not agreeing with her from the executive, even in the board. We know of incidents where about 8 board members had to resign because they felt that they were not being taken seriously, more especially by the minister at the time, Minister of Public Enterprises, Malusi Gigaba at the time. And they realized that one of the issues that they raised was that as members of the board, Companies Act is actually central. It's important in terms of the work. And some of the things that were happening in those institutions actually was forcing them to neglect their responsibility and fiduciary roles. And that's why you saw an exodus of resignation that happened. And clearly you could tell that there is a trend in terms of how this report portrays this particular individuals as powerful, doing as they please, ministers actually listening to what they were saying, and also insinuating that they had a very strong support from the presidency in doing whatever they were doing in those institutions.
So the report also wanting law enforcement agencies to investigate the U.S. management consulting company Bain. Just a reminder of what role this company and other international financial services companies played in the state capture narrative at SARS and the other SOEs.
Yeah, basically what happened is that there were several local and international companies that assisted, for example, you've mentioned Bain, that advised, for example, the Guptas in their companies, because you could tell that some of the advice that they were getting were sophisticated, were top end, in order to deal and to bypass the law in these countries. I mean, we do know of the auditing professions that also was found wanting. The report actually highlights that that the audit professions, and there is an acknowledgement in the industry that they didn't do what they were supposed to do. We know that every time when you look at the audit report of SAA and other institutions that implicated, you would find that they were given, there was a positive feedback that was given. But on the other side, you would find that, things were actually falling apart. The finances were not in order. Public finance management was also not properly followed. But despite that, you still have incidents where the audit profession given these institutions thumbs up, and then when the problems happened, it was clear that they were not doing what they were paid to do.
Well, thank you so much for giving us your initial thoughts on the report, SABC Economics editor Tshepo Mongwai. Thank you so much for your time.